Welcome to the Disability Dialogues podcast by people with disability for people with disability. On the 25th of February 2026, the Disability Dialogue kicked off its first open dialogue event called Navigating High School, TAFE, and University as a Disabled Young Person. This open dialogue event was about equal education for teenagers and young adults with disability, specifically those navigating high school, TAFE, and university as a disabled young person. This event was hosted by Kiz Blanca-Jackson, who is a community organiser and disability right advocate, and Sophie Geeves, who is a disability advocate and CP Active champion. Guest event speakers included Madeleine Gay from Children and Young People with Disability, CYDA, Brooke Canham from Inclusion Australia, and Ryan Rowland from Up the Hill, a program that supports people with intellectual disability. This event begins with co-host Kiz Blanca-Jackson welcoming the online audience to the open dialogue event.
Hi everyone, my name's Kiz Blanca-Jackson. I am a femme presenting white person with dark curly brown hair that's above my shoulders, wearing a black shirt. I'd like to welcome you all to the first open dialogue of 2026. It's very exciting. These dialogue events are a place for people with disability and our community to talk openly and frankly about the things that matter to us. Before I get into it, I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land in which we gather. I'm joining you all from the unceded land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Please feel free to acknowledge what lands you are currently in the chat. I want to recognize their continued connection to the lands and waters of this beautiful place that I live on. And particularly today, as our conversation will be on the intersection of disability and education. That Aboriginal people have been systemically excluded from educational institutions, despite them being the traditional custodians of knowledge on this land. And the intersection there with Aboriginal people experiencing higher rates of disability compared to their non-Aboriginal peers or non-First Nation peers. And that's an intersection that I think during our conversations today, we should keep in the front of our mind during these discussions. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and their ancestors and any First Nations people that are here today. It always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophie Geeves. I'm a disability advocate with lived experience of both physical and sensory disabilities. I have worked in this sector over the last 8 years, both in program development and systemic advocacy. I have a Bachelor of Inclusive Education and Disability Studies, and am currently studying my Bachelor of Social Work with honours at UNSW. A visual description of what I'm wearing today and what you can see on the screen is that I'm wearing I have a white shirt on with blue stripes. I have dark creases with my hair tied back, and you'll also see my power wheelchair in the background. Just in case anyone is wondering why we do visual descriptions of ourselves, it's to make this discussion more accessible for people who are blind or low vision. So when everyone is talking, if we can just please encourage everyone to give a visual description of who they are, what they're wearing before they start talking. This just helps make the meetings accessible and inclusive for all. And we we like to make sure that these events are as welcoming as possible. For those that haven't been to our events before, welcome. The open dialogue is designed to be inclusive, accessible, collaboratively, respectful, and importantly fun. A big shout out to our partners, Dana, Inclusion Australia, Alliance 20, Melbourne Disability Institute. We are also funded through an information linkages and capacity building grant from the Department of Social Services, otherwise known as DSS.
So now we do have a little bit of housekeeping before we start, just to make sure everyone has a bit of an idea of how today will go. We really want to ensure that it's a safe and inclusive and open space for everyone. So to begin with, AI tools aren't allowed. We know they can be useful for people with disability, myself included, especially summarizing things. But we also want to respect everyone's privacy. So the transcript will be uploaded to the event page shortly after the event's over, and it'll be sent to everyone that's attended via email. Secondly, we do try to stick to time throughout the open dialogue so that we can hear from all our guests and have time to hear from the audience as well. So we really do have that inclusive community feel to this discussion. So that means we might have to interrupt you sometimes, myself or Sophie, just to move things along. We're not being rude, we promise. We just need to make sure that everyone's voices get heard. We do encourage everyone to have their camera on if that is accessible for you, and if you're comfortable with that. And that way it feels more like we're in a room just having a discussion rather than a presentation. I understand though, some people that isn't accessible for them. Sometimes I can't have my camera on. That's totally fine. You don't have to have it. It's all good. We will be collecting everyone's comments in the chat and any questions in the chat as well throughout the event. And based on your questions in the chat, we might ask you to share them on mic if you're comfortable. So just be aware of that. And just before we begin as well, I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. So my name's Kiz. I have a bachelor's degree of communications and international studies. I'm currently studying a diploma of Auslan at TAFE. I briefly did a master's in education, so I've had a wide range of experience at university. But I was also the 2020 National Disabilities Office Bearer for the National Union of Students. So I represented all disabled students in Australia, basically during COVID, which was a fun time. And I've now worked in the sector probably about 7 years, so variety of roles there as well. And I'm an advocate. I myself have multiple disabilities. So yeah, let's get into it. Sophie, do you want to talk a bit about that survey that we did?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kiz. So you might have seen the survey we sent through before this event. If you didn't, that's totally fine. There's absolutely no pressure. So yeah, no worries if you didn't get to it. But in that survey, we asked participants to reflect on their experiences, or the experiences of the person you care for, during high school, TAFE, and university. Well, on the screen now, you can see that we brought up some of the results, because I think it's great because I think it's a great way to kick off the conversation. So I think this is been quite an interesting topic, I reckon, because I think you would have seen recently because of the work that we did at CP Active, that there's been some changes to the way that people with disability can access their HSC provisions, and it got me reflecting on the supports that I received at high school and currently receive at university. And I think one thing that's been really interesting and something that you'll see throughout this survey is that everyone's experience is really hit and miss. There doesn't seem to be, a one size fits all model or a consistent approach, which, ideally speaking, it shouldn't matter what institution you attend in Australia, everyone should have the same experience because everyone does have the right to equal access to education. Because I was really keen to get what your thoughts were and maybe share a bit about your experience, growing up with a disability in the education sector.
Yeah, definitely. I think my high school experience was very different to TAFE and university, but also, like you said, every university does it differently. Um, Sometimes universities, they just have a disability action plan, which is that document that outlines how they're going to make the university more accessible and more inclusive to people with disability. They have the paper, but they ignore it. Others are really great and really supportive of anyone that needs additional access, whether or not they have a formal diagnosis, whether or not they're told they need to go get a new one, even though they've had the same disability their whole life. And then some are very strict to the letter about how they follow the requirements that they need to meet. And so I think that it's, like you said, very varied based on the luck of the draw sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think high school's one thing, and I feel like, it's totally dependent on how much dedication and how much investment your teachers are going to put in. But even, I have completed my first degree, and now I'm on to my second, and they're at two different universities, and the support that I've received at one compared to the other is vastly different. And, I just think, well, in reality, we all have access to the same funding, all the institutions have access to the same funding. We all have theoretically should have access to the same resources. Why is it so vastly different? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And we know that everyone experiences disability differently, and so they have different access needs. But why is an individual's access needs, the approach changing from each university, particularly when we know what we need? You should just give it to us, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly. It
I know
shouldn't
you.
be justified.
Exactly, exactly. And I know that you briefly mentioned that campaign through CP Active in New South Wales. Can you talk about that a little bit more? What happened there?
Yeah, so about 2022, so what's that, about between 3 and 4 years ago now, a group of us, young people with CP got together and we were talking about our experiences across a variety of different aspects of life, as young people with CP. But one thing that really emerged out of that, despite, all of us having, varied experiences in upbringing and things like that, one thing that was really consistent was that there was no consistent approach, or there were no consistent guidelines to how people had the opportunity to do their HSC. So for me, for example, I went to a school where I was very fortunate that the school had quite a bit of experience supporting people with disability in mainstream school and supporting them through the HSC. So I had the situation where teachers and the school were preparing for my HSC provisions from day one of year seven. So collecting that data around how long it was taking me to do my exams, how much extra time I was given, what provisions were put in place to make sure that I had equal access. So by the time I got to year 12, don't get me wrong, there was still a mountain of reports and things that and assessments that I had to undergo, which shouldn't have been the case. It should have just been like, no, Sophie's got cerebral palsy, she's got a hearing impairment, she's got a vision impairment. These are the privileges she's had for the last 13 years of school. We're gonna carry that on. But instead it became this real saga, I guess, of constantly advocating and proving the level of my disability against the provisions that I was requesting. So now, thanks to the work that we've done at CP Active, now the schools will have a lot more oversight and a lot more say in the provisions that are given to students. And it will, and also they will also be given a lot more weight as well if a student has an NDIS plan, for example. Quite obviously they've already met the criteria of having a significant and profound disability. So the hope is that these provisions that they would have accessed in the last 12, 13 years of school, they will carry on to the HSC without having to go through a rigorous assessment. We'll see how it pans out, but that's the hope.
Incredible. And that really links well into the survey findings.
Yeah.
The slide, I think, they're pulling it up now. The question about high school supports.
Yeah. So really interestingly, through the survey, we asked you how well do you think high school support young people with disability throughout their education. But you can see here on the slide that the pie, if you like, has been split into 3 parts. So it says that half of the people answered half of the people answered that they think that high school support young people with disability. Some of the time, 41.7% said that schools support students most of the time, and 8.3% said that that high schools support students most of the time. So what was really I guess evident from this survey is, so it looks like that no one got support all of the time, which I think is really telling as part of the survey, and really speaks volumes. And so it means that all of you that answered feels like support kind of fell in that in between bracket. We also asked you to tell us a bit more about your answer, and we got so many interesting different experiences, but here are just a few. The next 2 screens are some of your responses in the speech bubbles.
The first one there says, I think high school supports young people with disabilities most of the time because they include young people with disabilities in an inclusive classroom together with non-disabled learners. However, this continues on. However, some young people with disabilities end up getting lower grades because some activities are not accessible for them and they are not given any alternative assessment. For example, blind people have a hard time to do visual activities such as drawing or paintings, so they were not able to accomplish them. And I also know that's the case in universities, interestingly.
Yeah, and I think I'd just like to add a comment to that, Kiz, if I can. Reflecting back on my school experience, the 2 subjects that I did the best in the HSC, so they were my strongest subjects, and I did quite well in them. And I had the same teacher for both those subjects, but that particular teacher had supported me from year 8 all the way through to year 12, and she was evidently invested in learning, in continuous development on learning how to support people, students with disability the best she could. So, whether that meant attending extra professional development days, and I think that really just speaks volumes as to how well the teachers make the effort, and they put in, and we're not talking huge amounts of effort, we're just talking a little bit of effort to get to know someone's provisions and what someone needs. That goes a long way to supporting the student, and the results show.
100%. But on the next slide as well, we'll talk about, I guess, the similarities there with TAFE and university. But I think across the board, the frustrating thing is it shouldn't have to come down to one teacher wanting to put in that effort. There's a systemic problem there. If you're not lucky enough to have a good teacher, then you miss out, and that's a problem systemically. But moving on to the next question, we asked you what you thought about sports for young students at TAFE or university. The grading was the same, so we asked you to rank it from 1 to 5, with ranging from being supported all the time, which was 1, or not being supported at all, which was ranked 5. On this screen, we have a pie chart as well, cut into 5 pieces, with 10% of people who took the survey saying that TAFE and universities always support people with a disability. 10% of people say they are supported most of the time. 30% say young people are supported some of the time, so they gave them 3 in the middle. 40% said young people are supported very little, and 10% said unis and TAFE don't support young people at all. So a little bit of a wider range of experiences with university and TAFE, but we'll go into a bit more of that with why you answered the way that you did in the survey. And we got a few responses there. So one of them was that the staff involved with disability supports are amazing, but the same cannot be said of lecturers and their support staff, who are more fixated on their unit outcomes and student education and satisfaction. And another one said that I felt that I was really valued as a human being. I was included in all the activities, and I was giving reasonable adjustments to participate in class. I was giving alternative assessments for inaccessible activities. So it's really interesting here that there's more of a wider range, both positive and negative, but they can be systemic, and there's such a wide range at universities and TAFEs that there's a problem there, because it shouldn't be. It should be the same throughout and consistent, and our rights should be applied consistently, but it looks like they're not. So thank you everyone for filling in the survey. Let's bring up our first speaker. Over to you, Sophie.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just lost my place. So we asked. So we asked you how you think young people support through TAFE and university. There were so many. We've got some on the screen. So the next. Sorry. So our first speaker that we've got here is Madeleine from CYDA. So she is from Children and Young People with Disability, Children and Young, and CYDA. And so I'll let you say hello, and we'll give it. And if you can give a description of yourself.
Thanks, Sophie. Maddie speaking. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeleine Gay, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a person of colour, and I have long brown hair, brown eyes. I've got some black headphones on, and I'm wearing a grey top. As Sophie mentioned, I'm a policy and research officer at Children and Young People with Disability, and I'm really pleased to be joining you all today to talk about inclusive education.
Thanks, Maddie. So CYDA has been advocating for inclusive education for some time now. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges young people with disability face when navigating high school and university?
Maddie speaking. Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So yeah, inclusive education is a central part of the advocacy work that we do at CYDA. And that's informed by some of the experiences, challenges, and the needs of students with disability. And we've learnt through our education surveys, consultation, engagement directly with students and children and young people with disability about some of the challenges that they face at high school and university. We also work closely with other organisations as a part of the Australian Coalition for Inclusive Education. You may also know that as ACE. And we're working with them to develop a national roadmap to inclusive education in Australia. My colleagues also recently launched the South Australian Roadmap for Inclusive Education, which was co-designed by children and young students with disability, their families and their kin. And this is really a guiding document for, I guess, how inclusive education can be implemented across Australia. As for some of the challenges that young people with disability face, we've heard that issues like such as the ones that you've previously mentioned in your survey, were things such as reduced study and course options, some like a lack of meaningful supports, poor attitudes and misconceptions or stereotypes from staff, and just overall inaccessibility and inflexibility, especially in the university tertiary environment, which create barriers to participation. I'm a young uni student with disability, and I can personally attest to many of those barriers that I mentioned previously. Facing those in university, there's a real lack of flexibility in some of the course options. And as your surveys responses found, there's not a consistent approach to reasonable adjustments or accommodations in tertiary education. So those are just some of the challenges that we face, but I'll touch on that more as we speak.
Thanks, Maddie, for those thanks, Maddie, for that question. We will go to the next one. So the next one is, can you tell us a bit about what CYDA has learned through its recent national surveys?
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So we heard from over 400 children and young people with disability and their parents, caregivers and kin about their experiences in education. And this national education survey, CYDA, we hold these regularly, and we conducted this in 2024 to the beginning of 2025, so last year. And the report, Disillusion and Delay, summarised a lot of these findings and some of the challenges that young people with disability face. And what we found was a lot of ongoing systemic issues of widespread bullying and exclusion, ineffective school support planning, lack of teacher training, and non-inclusive school cultures. Overwhelmingly, we heard that from children and young people with disability that they had experienced exclusion, in particular when navigating school. And that was 72% of the participants reported being excluded from activities at school. So being removed from the classroom or being left out of activities, either directly or indirectly through supports not being met And that just really highlights a lack of social and extracurricular inclusion, and a lack of opportunities for meaningful engagement. And some of these stories were very harrowing, and they highlighted some of the, the real life impacts of exclusion that school has on children and young people. And these barriers are real and persistent. But I do also want to note that we heard some positive stories and examples of students being supported by their teachers when their teachers are being well resourced, and that they have the support, the teachers have the supports that they need. They are then able to support children in their classrooms as well. So I think it's important to have that nuance in the conversation, is that there are some positives, but it's about creating an inclusive environment, creating proactive whole school approaches, and that will see a shift in preventing bullying and exclusion. And I think it's really important to invest in ongoing capability building for teachers, inclusive education, and creating an inclusive school culture so that, every child can feel like they belong.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's safe to say that an inclusive culture really just makes it or breaks it, doesn't it, for the student? And I think, having that inclusive environment can really can really, change a child's or alter a child's experience. Okay, great. So the next question I have for you is what are some of the recommendations that CYDA has to the Department of Education to make it more fair and inclusive?
Yeah, so in CYDA's recent submission to the Disability Standards for Education, which that submission has been linked in the chat. Thanks, Kayla. Sorry, the light's turning off. So we were calling on the government to strengthen the standards. Sorry, I'm just in a meeting room and the light has turned off. 1 second. Sorry, I'm back. So we were calling for the Department of Education to implement the disability standards for education and strengthen them to make sure that they are genuinely delivering some inclusive education across Australia. As they're currently working, the standards for education are meant to protect rights of students with disability, to reduce the barriers, exclusion, harmful practices. And we believe that in order to genuinely deliver this, the standards need to be strengthened. And so that includes replacing restrictive inclusionary practices with positive behaviour support, providing clear and accessible complaints processes. And one very important point is developing some stronger individual education plans with genuine participation. We often hear from parents and caregivers and students themselves that their individual education plans are developed in consultation, but students themselves their voices aren't actually heard, and their needs aren't represented in those education plans. And sometimes they're made without any consultation or without involvement with children themselves. So having some clear accountability and transparency across the system, especially for some of the assessments and the education plans, to make sure that there is a standard, and that these changes will make sure that the standards as they currently are can be more transformative, and that there's more inclusive and high quality education for every child, whether you have a disability or not.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Thanks, Maddie. I don't know about everyone else, but I've certainly found that conversation really informative. And I think it's so good to have an organisation like CYDA that specifically focus on young people. So I just really wanted to thank Maddie for her time. So thank you. I will now hand over to Kiz.
Thanks, Sophie and Madeleine, for that. Next, our next speaker is Brooke Canham from Inclusion Australia. Brooke is an experienced self-advocate with over 5 years' experience working in the disability sector, as the policy officer within Inclusion Australia. Can you say hello, give a brief description of yourself?
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm a policy officer for Inclusion Australia. And a visual of myself is I'm wearing glasses, I've got a bit of blondish hair, I've got a grey shirt, yeah, and
Awesome.
pale white skin.
Me too, don't worry. Today you'll be speaking about the Polished Pathway program. Can you give us a little bit of background information on that?
Yeah, sure. Inclusion Australia created a model called the Polished Pathway. The Polished Pathway shows how people with an intellectual disability are put on a different path from other people with and without disability. We use the word polished because the path is very smooth. There are no roadblocks or barriers on the polished pathway.
We're showing an image of that on the screen right now. For anyone who can't see it, can you describe what it looks like?
So it's colourful, it's green and yellow. There's like a light lime green and dark green. There's some cones on the pathway and they are yellow to show about the leading on the pathway.
Yeah, and so the image has a few different roads.
Yes.
And go ahead.
Okay, so the image looks like different roads or pathways that start at school and end at different kinds of work. Most of the pathways have obstacles and look very messy. An obstacle is something that will stop you or make it harder for you to move past. The obstacles are shown as traffic cones. There is one pathway that has no obstacles or traffic cones. This is the polished pathway. This pathway starts at special school and goes straight to a day service or Australian Disability Enterprise. We call these ADEs. The obstacles or roadblocks on the other pathways leads you back down the polished pathway. On the diagram, the roadblocks stop you from getting to other kinds of work, like open employment or self-employment, and lead back to the polished pathway. This diagram looks messy on purpose because the real pathway is messy and confusing too. If we made it look neat, it wouldn't show the real problems people face. Showing the mess helps people understand why the system needs to change.
Thank you, Brooke. The Polished Pathway is a really great way to explain the method. Can you tell us how it starts?
So the polished pathway usually starts when the person with intellectual disability is young. People with an intellectual disability and their families usually don't even realize they are on the polished pathway. People with an intellectual disability and their families often make decisions over many years that keep them on the polished pathway because it can feel easier and safer as there are no obstacles. Decisions are made when the person starts primary school, when they start secondary or high school, when they finish year 10 and start year 11, and when they finish year 12. We call the end of year 12 the October cliff.
Why is it called the October Cliff?
When a person with an intellectual disability finishes school, they can go a long time without any support, work experience, learning activities, or employment options. This is what we call October Cliff. It is a time between the end of year 12 and the start of pre or post-school programs the following year. Sometimes during this time, schools may hold expos about options after school, but only some options are provided. This is usually working as an ADE or going to a day service. This is the polished pathway. There is rarely any information about other work experiences or further education options provided to families.
So, Brooke, what happens if you don't follow the polished path?
If families and people with an intellectual disability try to follow a different pathway, such as going to TAFE or university or using disability employment services, they will usually experience obstacles.
Yeah, so let's pull up that image again of the polished path. I can see a lot of cones, particularly on the path to open employment, which means there must be a lot of obstacles. Can you tell me about those?
If someone with an intellectual disability wants to work in open employment, it's likely they will need to follow the Disability Employment Services, for short, DES, pathway, which has recently been replaced with the new Inclusive Employment Australia, for short, IEA, program. It is a main Commonwealth program to support people with disabilities seeking employment. The purpose of this program is to help people with disability prepare for employment, find and keep a job. Unfortunately, data shows that people with an intellectual disability only make up less than 4% of people they are supporting. It hasn't been easy for people with an intellectual disability to get help from DES. Until recently, you had to be able to work at least 8 hours a week to get DES support. If you were stated as unable to work 8 hours because of your disability, you weren't automatically offered DES support. Inclusion Australia advocated for this requirement to be removed, and we are happy to see it was removed last year. But lots of people still don't know about this change.
Well, it's great to hear that Inclusion Australia was successful. But is it true that people with intellectual disability are sometimes told not to work because they'll lose all of their disability support pension?
Yes, the rules can be confusing, and it means that some people with an intellectual disability are told not to work because they will lose their DSP. They are rules that say if you work and earn above a certain amount of your DSP will be reduced. Some people are scared of losing their DSP, so they don't work. The rules are not easy to read and understand. There are other rules as well, such as if you are eligible and how much you can work. These are all obstacles.
Those cones on the graphic from before. So the disability dialogue is trying to change the way that people think about disability. We know that there are people in the community who believe negative things about people with intellectual disability. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So there are lots of people in the community who believe negative things about people with an intellectual disability. This might be because of things they have read or have been told. Some people believe that employing someone with an intellectual disability is risky or costs too much. People with an intellectual disability can't work or don't want to work. There are no jobs in the open workforce that would be suited to a person with an intellectual disability. People with an intellectual disability are not as productive as their peers without a disability. These are barriers that people with an intellectual disability face if they try a pathway such as going to TAFE or university or applying for a job. The polished pathway does not have any of these barriers, so it seems easier or safer for people with an intellectual disability and their families.
Before we finish, is there one key message that you want to leave people with about the polished pathway?
Yeah. So the polished pathway is not about Inclusion Australia saying one kind of job is better or worse than the other because we know that everyone has different needs and goals. What we do want the polished pathway to do is to show where choice and control has been removed from people with an intellectual disability and their families. We want there to be more inclusive pathways with less obstacles for people with an intellectual disability to follow to achieve their own goals.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you for teaching us all about the polished pathway. I agree. I think that then does definitely need to be more inclusive pathways with less of those traffic cones for people with intellectual disabilities, and everyone deserves choice and control. And if you want to go to TAFE or university or open employment, you should be supported to do that. Wonderful. So if anyone does have any more questions for Brooke in the audience, please pop them in the chat and we'll respond to them at a later time. We're just very conscious of time, so want to make sure we're keeping to that. Now we're going to take a 10-minute break before we're joined by our next guest, Ryan Rowland from Up the Hill. So grab a drink or whatever you might need, cup of tea, water, and we'll see you all back here in 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, guys. We'll just oh, gotta turn my screen on. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, guys. We'll just slowly start coming back, and Thank you so much for bearing with us. It's been a really great conversation. So now we have our next guest, Ryan Rowland, who we mentioned before the break. Ryan graduated from the Up the Hill project, which is a project that supports people with intellectual disability to go to university. He is passionate about arts and music. He enjoys visual arts, playing his electric guitar, and singing lessons. Hi, Ryan. Really lovely to meet you. Could you please give us a visual description of yourself? Ryan, I think you might have your microphone on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I have glasses, white shirt, and a hoodie, and all that stuff. So,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you so much. So, Ryan, could you please tell us what you did what you did through the Up the Hill project?
Well, I did things like drawing and design fundamentals, painting, film form and analysis, who, what, when, and where, which is a creative writing course, and also I wrote a poem, and of course I did screen production. Then finally, the emotional power of music.
Amazing. So it sounds like you did quite a lot then.
Yes.
That's great. How did you get involved in Up the Hill?
Well, I actually heard about it from people that I knew. So, and plus a couple of people I knew were themselves a part of the Up the Hill project.
Awesome. Okay, the next question we have for you is, what did you find challenging at university?
Well, navigating the campus at first was a bit of a challenge. So, but as I got to know the place, I actually began to know my way around.
Yeah, that's fair enough, because universities are very big places, so I think it's even I find it tricky to navigate, and I think anyone does when they're navigating a new place, so that's totally fair enough. What did
Yeah.
what did you enjoy most about attending classes?
Well, I enjoyed the learning process, and it was like a lot of things that I didn't learn when I was younger.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And also, it also taught me like how art contrives with emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Can you tell us about some of the opportunities you have had since finishing your university classes?
Well, I had the opportunity to get to know people without disabilities, and also like do some social stuff around the campus as well. And it was also like very calm environment as well.
Right. So you really liked the environment, and you found that you thrived in that environment?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Okay. Well, thanks, thanks heaps, Ryan, and thank you very much for that informative conversation.
Yeah.
Can 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 I also can I also ask you a few questions?
Okay.
So you mentioned that that you've now gone to university. What so what are you doing now since you finished university?
Well, I've been taking some art lessons, also been doing music lessons as well, and I also do drama performances and also take acting classes as well
Yeah, yeah.
for
And
both stage and film.
and have you found have you found that that you've had more opportunities since leaving university
Yes.
than what you had before?
Yep.
Okay, okay, that sounds good. And one thing I'm really also interested to know is what was your favorite subject at university?
Well, I guess like it'd have to be either like the drawing, design, and painting, or the creative writing that I did.
Wow, wow, it sounds like you're definitely the creative type. I can't say that I inherited that
Yeah.
trait, so I might have to
Mm,
take a few lessons um from
mm,
you. Um can I also ask before hearing about the program, the Up the
mm.
Hill project, did you ever think about going to university? Was that ever on the cards for you?
Uh, it it was like well, before the NDIS came in, like getting into university for disabled people was really hard back in the day.
Yeah, yeah. So do you feel like that with the right support, you've been able to achieve what you wanted to achieve?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And do you think that it's important maybe other people watching this webinar that can maybe take away that maybe they don't have to follow the polished pathway like Brooke was talking about earlier, and maybe they can challenge themselves
Yeah.
and go to university with the right support. Do you think that that's important?
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you had one piece of advice for people on this call with intellectual disability or even just disability more broadly, and they were thinking about going to university or doing some extra study, but maybe they're a little bit nervous or
Yeah.
something like that, what would you say to that? What would you say to those people?
I'd say do your best and try to remain positive as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy enjoy the enjoy what you have.
Yeah, yeah. And do you and I would like to open this up for a big Q&A. Maybe throw to Kiz for a question or two, and then maybe we
Mhm.
open it up to the wider audience. Do
Yep.
you Kiz, do you have any questions for Ryan or any of the other speakers at this time?
Yeah, so we'll bring our speakers up from before as well, both Maddie and Brooke. Welcome back. Um, Ryan,
Yeah.
you mentioned that before the NDIS, you hadn't really considered university because of those barriers there. Do you think that with the Up the Hill program, it made it easier to navigate your specific university, or do you think it's more of a wider experience in the program?
Yeah. Yeah, it made it much more accessible for me, and like plus like it gave me the opportunity to taste what university life is actually like for people with both with or without disabilities. And it's a really calm atmosphere when you get to know a lot of the students.
And what do you think are some of the things that might make high school uni inaccessible for people with disability?
Well, it can be like a learning curve for for people who have like had it like really tough back in my day. Like, for example, and like it is like really, it's really hard to put it into words. Like, for example, my whole life I had to navigate through the education system the old-fashioned way, and of course, like as I grew up, I got more and more support as my youth went on.
Yeah, and having those skills to self-advocate and ask for that support is really something we get as we get older, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brooke, I might ask you the same question if that's okay. What do you think is some of the things that make high school, TAFE, or university inaccessible for people with intellectual disability?
Sometimes they don't give people enough chances, you know, to reach their potential. And I always think about their disability and they're not able to do something, and obviously it's discrimination, and they don't show the respect and the remorse that they should be giving individual people who have a disability, to show that they are capable to do something they can do.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of assumptions there about how people with disability should be.
And it hurts people with disability enough to actually sit and face that, and they're taking that and not actually speaking up for themselves and saying, this is like kind of hurting, like, don't speak to me like that, you know, and they're just taking it and not trying to express how they're feeling and how they should be treated in those situations, like at uni and TAFE or schools.
It could be tiring always having to do that, right?
And that's where it leads back to decision making, you know what I mean?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. We should all have the right to decide what we do.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of expectations, at school, they're quite low for people with intellectual disability. Is that right?
Yes.
And how does that impact the decisions that you can make?
Like, you can always like find a way through those barriers, and like I know it's hard. Like, it can, with the right support, like you can actually like help make it a bit more easier by working your way through them.
But touch base on what Ryan's saying. There's not much materials for people with intellectual disability to access through TAFE uni schools to actually know what to do, kind of thing, in easy read or just plain English, so people can understand what's happening, so that they can be still involved in that process.
100%. I like the lack of inaccessible communication is a huge problem across all universities with all disabilities. Madeleine, maybe in your research and policy and all that kind of stuff, have you found anything about the way universities and TAFEs and high schools communicate with students and how that impacts them and their ability to engage?
A lot of the students interact with people from various backgrounds in different communities, not just disabled people, but people of color, people of different ethnic origin, religion, sexual preferences, you name it. It just goes on and on.
Maddie speaking. Touching on that point, yeah, I agree that there's that like you were saying, that communication that's accessible can be a real barrier to participating. And I think having a look at some of the resources that are available for children by other disability representative organisations that are in accessible formats such as Easy Read, Auslan. I think those resources are really important in setting up children and their families with things that they can expect going into school and going into university with those transitions. But once you're at university or you're at school, if the content that is being taught isn't accessible, that's a real barrier. So I think it's just about continuously advocating, not only individuals advocating, but systemic advocacy to have those adaptations and those supports put in place.
Yeah, like it's like a really sophisticated system, like for us, because like for example, like some of us get hardly anything, even though we accomplish a lot.
But
and also, yeah.
You go, Ryan. Sorry, I just cut you off. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go
ahead.
Even with communication, I feel like that's a massive barrier because they don't communicate well enough to help the person with an intellectual disability or disability to realize what the situation they're going through, like through uni, TAFE, and the attitudes coming across that makes you feel you don't want to be there. So I remember signing up for TAFE a while ago and they said no because I have a disability. So I then thought, I have no luck to do this course. So I never went back. So that put a shame on me and put a shame on them when talking to someone like that. And so like the attitude needs to change and needs to be more positivity in the way they speak about disability and like bring them in and not push them away. Because we all have equal rights to have the education and we all have the equal right to be somewhere we want to be there and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, because like it's a really interesting question. Like people like just don't understand people like us, and it's really a really emotional thing that we take to heart sometimes. And yeah, it's very hard for us to get over. Like some people with disabilities like myself, and of course you guys also have mental disorders, like for example, depression, anxiety, and all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Sophie, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, I was. So we have a question from Lou in the chat. Is there any advice in terms of university learning assistance programs, in terms of accessing them? For example, she said that she's seeing barriers for some clients as a support coordinator, where allowances won't be made by some lecturers and other educational professionals, and what can be made and what can be made by some lecturers? What can we do to help young people be heard by universities? So I think what I'm gathering from that question, just to paraphrase, is that as a support coordinator, Lou's saying that a lot of clients aren't getting the support from lecturers and other university professionals, so what support can be provided. I might go to Madeleine and then maybe to Ryan for that question.
Yeah.
Maddie speaking. And thank you, Lou, for this question. It's a really important topic, and I think that it is something, honestly, that I have personally experienced at university, is that often where there are some supports, there you come up against some barriers. I think, it's not the whole system, but I think, and there's people within like universities who are supportive and are champions of making those reasonable adjustments and making those accommodations. But then, yes, if people aren't aware of the disability standards for education, or if they think, oh, that's not really my role or it's not really my problem, I think it leads to problematizing the students themselves. And I think it's about shifting that narrative and really putting the onus and accountability back on lecturers, on tutors, on the whole system itself, on the university. And I think we saw that in the Universities Accord report that came out early last year, is that there really needs to be a shift in the whole culture of universities as a whole, and to build in some accountability. So I think that's one thing that CYDA has called for, is that there needs to be a framework to hold universities to account, and to hold TAFE and all of those higher education institutions to account, and also to support the lecturers, the tutors, and raise more, have more education, so that they're aware that actually this is a part of your role. If you are not implementing these adjustments, that's discrimination, that's disability discrimination, and it is a part of your role that you need to have these put into place. And not making those accommodations is not a choice. You have to have those in place. So yeah, I think that is something that if you're Lou, if you're a support learning assistance program or support coordinator, is linking young people up with those supports that are there, and continuing to be a champion for their needs, and when you need to, I guess, linking in with the systems where you can report examples of discrimination. And I would suggest the Disability Discrimination Commission.
Ryan, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Not sure.
That's okay. I think you gave us some really good insights before, and I think Maddie's given us a really good overview of kind of some tips and tricks of how to provide additional support. I think, like anything, it's not going to be perfect. Okay. We're actually gonna bring up someone from the audience. I'll just give sorry, I just gotta get my Zoom. My Zoom's decided to go off screen. Hang on. Sorry, technology never works when you want it to. So Aaron, we had a question for you. Can I Can I actually throw to Kiz to ask this question? Is that okay?
Yeah. So, Aaron, you were saying
Yes.
some interesting things in the chat, particularly about accessibility advisors. Can you talk
Yes.
about that a bit more?
So universities now are starting to put on people, well, they've had them for a little while, but with the changes that have come into inclusive education, they are really pushing to have inclusion or accessibility advisors. And part of their role is they are somebody that you can go to and talk about what your supports are, and they can help you make those adjustments. And there are a range of things that they can do. I say that though, but I understand that there are still things that they need to get better at and things that they need to improve, especially with lecturers, because I think Brooke's point is a really good point, where sometimes you'll be dealing with a lecturer and the lecturer, you might have a hidden disability and the lecturer might not see why they need to make that adjustment. So it's important to have that support from those not disability, they're accessibility advisors, but they're really about helping people to get the changes that they need so that it can be an equal way of doing things. So I've recently heard about them, but I think, as Brooke has said, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to get them better at that. And also, it was really great to hear about Ryan's journey, because I remember seeing Ryan a long time ago, many, many years ago, his personal experience, and to see him now pursuing what he always loved, which was art and music, and having that opportunity, I think it's really, really great. So thank you to everybody for sharing that information. But remember, I think what's difficult sometimes is if you don't know about these things, how do you talk to people about them? So, yeah, thank you.
100%. Thank you for that, Aaron. And I do just want to note at some universities and TAFEs, they might be called different things. So they could be diversity inclusion advisors, disability support or disability access coordinators, things like that. So it might vary based on where you are studying, but those systems are in place to help us access what we need. So I do just want to quickly give a shout out to Valid, who are here today with us. I know that you guys are having a watch party with a room full of people, so big shout out. And I just want to thank everyone for coming. I think this was a really fantastic conversation to have, and there's so much more we could talk about. I'm sure we could do this for weeks if we had the time, but unfortunately we don't. We're all busy. So, yeah, Sophie, I'll hand over to you to wrap up.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kiz. I think we can all agree that this has been a super interesting conversation, and like so many topics for disability dialogue, this could go on for hours, so much longer than an hour and a half, like Kiz said. So I just really wanted to acknowledge everyone's time and effort that's gone into organizing today's event. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this topic if you have enjoyed this topic, be sure to register for our next open dialogue in March about friendships and relationships and intimacy. Another fabulous topic that no doubt will spark some great conversations. And so let's register for that. We also want you to we also want to hear from you and your thoughts of today's event. So if you have a few moments, we would love you to complete the survey, and we would really love to take that feedback on board. The links are available in the chat. The survey is also available in Easy Read. The survey will pop up on a screen once the event is over. And I'll pass over to Kiz for the last wrap up.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who attended. Ryan, Madeleine, and Brooke, thank you for sharing with us your knowledge and your experiences. And if you know someone who missed out on this fabulous conversation, we do record all of our open dialogues, so this recording and a transcript will be available on today's event page. So please feel free to check that out. Thank you all again, and bye for now.
That was the Disability Dialogue's Open Dialogue event on equal education for teens and young adults with disability. This podcast episode was produced by the Disability Dialogue, a national project for people with disability by people with disability. For more information on the Disability Dialogue and future events, visit www.disabilitydialogue.com.au or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn by searching the Disability Dialogue.